I missed the email about the dress code, so sorry about that. 13 years ago, I got a call from Dick Dietz, an astronomy professor at the University of Northern Colorado and an accomplished mountaineer. I heard you were interested in doing the traverse between Little Bear and Blanca. I've been looking for 30 years for someone crazy enough to do that with me. Little Bear and Blanca were two 14ers outside Alamosa. I was well into my journey to climb all the 14ers, and I let it slip at a Colorado Mountain Club meeting that I was thinking about crawling across the ridge between the two that allowed you to do both of them in one day. The word got out. 2 weeks after that call, I met Dick on a cold but clear summer morning, and we started our climb up Little Bear. Near the end, it got harder. The ledge got thinner till I realized that on either side there was a 2,000-foot drop. I was scared, but I didn't care because there was a summit. Yes. I'd knocked off one of the hardest 14ers in Colorado. Check mark. And then I looked over at the ridge that was going to take us to Blanca. And I realized why it took Dick 30 years to find someone crazy enough to do it with him. It looked like we were about to scramble over the side of a stegosaurus. Only it was a mile and a half. And that 2,000-foot drop that scared me would be there the entire time we would be scrambling over it. Well, we started, and the climbing was fun. I forgot about the danger. I frequently did that. The mountains were fun. They were, at times, especially in my early days, the only times I felt alive. So I got a little cocky. There was a step, and instead of stepping down, I jumped, and a rock spilled out from under me, and I started toppling and rolling like drying laundry. Back in the late 70s, my parents took us to Estes Park for the first time. It was a cheap vacation, and it was also beautiful, a completely different world from the plains of Kansas that surrounded a suburb from where I lived. We ate fudge downtown, drove Trail Ridge Road to see deer. We thought everything was deer back then. And worried about bears attacking our cabin. One night, we went to a hiking workshop, and a woman walked up to my parents and said, "My husband got up at midnight to climb Long's Peak." And my parents looked at each other and said, "That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life." 2 years later, they climbed it. My dad decided to cash in on some of that new fitness that you have to build to climb Longs. He decided to climb another mountain. This one was Mount Alice in the Wild Basin area of Rocky Mountain National Park. He came back from that one wearing a wild look in his eyes and a werewolf smile. He called it the best experience of his life. It was gorgeous, he said. He was hooked. He looked like he'd been snorting cocaine. When we went back the next year, it wasn't to eat fudge. It was to climb mountains. I saw that look, and it stuck with me. I decided I wanted to join him. I decided it was what I needed. Here's why. The bullying started in elementary school. Subtle things like picking me last in kickball, and if I ever made a good play, they would act surprised. As I grew older, it became louder and meaner, like the time they chanted my name in hatred at a Boy Scout camp, or even later in junior high school when they developed a name for me because the rumor spread that I was gay. Now, only the truly misguided these days worry if you're gay or not. But back then, this is the 80s, time of Ronald Reagan, AIDS, just a whole lot of misunderstanding. So people cared. And I cared. It hurt. They called me a name that I still can't say out loud. Well, that sticks with you. To this day, I'm more defensive than I should be, and anxious, maybe even a little paranoid. It's hard for me to make close friends. I don't trust people. I've seen their dark side. Back then, it sent me into a deep depression. My parents took me to a therapist. Some weekends I would spend hours in my room just crying. And all that sucks. But the worst part was I was surprised when I made a good play in kickball too. I believed the bullies. I believed I was worthless. It shattered my self-esteem. In fact, it made it hard for me to have any kind of self-esteem at all. I didn't like the mountain climbing at first. It's cold, and I hated to be cold. And it was dark. And remember, I was a teenager, so I preferred to sleep when it was dark, because you do have to get up at midnight to do these things. And most of all, it was hard. It was really hard. It was uphill, and you were sore afterward. And many times the altitude made me sick. But when I made the summit, many times after hours and hours of grit, I felt good about myself. If I could do that, maybe I could do other things. Maybe I could go on living. Found that if I did hit the mountains every summer with my dad, my well of self-esteem would fill up. Almost the whole year, till those voices would start to talk to me again, and the depression would start up. But then there were the mountains to let me know that everything was okay. When I moved to Colorado in 1999, just because I wanted to be close to them, I wanted to climb all the 14ers because it was a goal, and because they were beautiful, and because I got addicted to that good feeling. My self-esteem became pretty high. Some to this day would still say I'm overcompensating. I didn't care how dangerous the mountains were. I actually enjoyed that part of it. And as I was rolling off the side of Little Bear, like drying laundry, well, this was not the first time I was in a situation that should have killed me. But I was lucky this time too. I blindly stuck out my leg, and it found a rock, and it wrapped around it, like the way a boa wraps around a rat. And I stopped. You still can't see it here, but I've got a little stitch that I had to sew this up from it smashing against a rock. I looked over the side, and an ugly end was only a couple feet away. Well, 2,000 feet away, but you get the idea. That close call stuck with me the rest of the day. That climb was by far the most terrifying experience of my life. Many times we had to crawl over a ledge no wider than a sidewalk. But we did it, slowly but surely, through shaking hands and a nervous stomach. And I still remember scooting across to the end of Blanca, bloodied, snot in my nose, cold, and getting on my knees and kissing the salty highest rock. And then I puked. The adventure wasn't over. I made it back to my tent in the dark. Took a long time. And I packed my things after an hour nap. The batteries in my headlamp had run out, but I knew Kate, my wife, would be worried, and I had to make it to work the next day. A full moon shone silver light over the dark path, and I hiked out that night to it. I'll never forget it. When I made it to my car, I had several messages from Kate, worried as hell. I finished the 14ers a couple years later. I've climbed other mountains. I did more then. I've done more now. But I've never done anything nearly as risky as that. That phone call stuck with me. Made me realize I've got people who need me now. I have 3 kids, and Kate and a golden retriever named Casey, after my hometown. I still climb, but I also do other things to fill that well. And I still need to fill it, despite my overcompensation. I'm a father, I'm a writer, I'm a musician. I am the best middle-aged Pokemon Go player you'll ever see. And I'm a runner. This summer, in September, I ran a 50-mile race over a steamboat. I'm still proud of that. It's possible and maybe even probable that you need something to repair or refill or maybe even rebuild the self-esteem because someone took it from you. You can find your thing like me, but here's the thing. It has to scare you. It has to scare you. You don't have to risk your life. You don't have to climb what I did. In fact, please don't. But you have to do something that you didn't think was possible. You have to run 50 miles. You have to sing in front of a crowd. You have to play poker for real money. You have to give a speech. You have to make friends. You have to let people love you, and you have to love them back. It has to scare you. It's the only way to feel that well. This is a lot harder than sitting at a keyboard. I still visit the mountains regularly to run and to hike and to breathe. Recently, I found a pretty cool fact. The dirt that covers all those trails, I've stomped all over. It's made up of rocks and sand and clay and whatever else that makes up our landscape. But I like to think it's all those voices and all those doubts they created as my shoes grind them down into dust. But I like the way that dust covers me now. I like how dirty I get. I even like the way it makes me smell. I like the way it sticks with me. Because when I go home, I can wash all of it off and watch and smile as it runs off my tired body, my exhausted legs, and my refreshed spirit, and goes down, down, down the drain. Thank you.